Today is Tuesday, the 7th of July 2026. A pleasant good morning to you. And a warm welcome to your breakfast show. Good morning, Sarah Leone. The program that always starts your day with analysis and divergent of views on news and current happenings in the country. We are your presenters. I'm Esther Sapo.
And I am Emmanuel Samuel. Well, we start the program with the quote of the day. The quote of the day is from Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi, and it says, "Live as if you are to die tomorrow. Learn as if you are to live forever." I go over it again. It says, "Live as if you are to die tomorrow. Learn as if you are to live forever."
That's very deep.
Those that puts they put so much of stress on themselves. So Mahatma Gandhi is saying that live as if you are to die tomorrow and learn as if you are to live forever.
Well, coming up in this edition of the program, Sierra Leone and Guinea will open a younger border after diplomatic engagements.
Sierra Leone police unveil new forensic lab to tackle organized crime.
And the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education speaks on the scheduled 2026 Basic Education Certificate Examination (BECE), exams, malpractice penalties, and other education issues. On that note, that's how we invite you to participate in the program by sending your text message to the number displayed on your screen or send your comments on our Facebook page, slbc.sl. The program is Good Morning Sierra Leone, live on the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. Stay with us.
Well, the program you're watching is Good Morning Sierra Leone live on the SLBC. We start the conversation proper to our first headline story that has to do with the Yenga. The government of Sierra Leone has announced the opening of the border crossing at Yenga village along the Makona River following sustained diplomatic engagement between Sierra Leone and the Republic of Guinea. According to a public notice issued by the Ministry of Information and Civic Education on 6th July 2026, the border, which had been closed since 28 April 2025, officially reopened on 24th June 2026 at the Koindu Nongwa crossing point in Kisiteng Chiefdom Kailang district. The reopening has restored cross-border trade and the movement of people between the two countries. The prolonged closure has had resulted in significant humanitarian and economic challenges, including the displacement of residents from Yenga to Koindu and surrounding communities. The government noted that during this period, support was provided to affected populations while diplomatic efforts continued to resolve the impasse. In the studio, we have the Director of Strategic Communications, Office of National Security, Abdul Karim Will. Good morning, Mr. Win, and welcome to Good Morning Sierra Leone.
Good morning, SMEC, and good morning, Sir. Thank you for having me.
When I saw this press release from the Ministry of Information, so many questions, came up my mind. And one of those questions is like, I really want to know when the government said that the border Yenga and that Nongwa Koindu crossing is now open. I want you to put it into actual context. In your own term, what do you mean that it's open?
It means it was closed. It was closed to free movement of people, goods and services. people of either end of the border were not expected to travel. Traveling on that part would have been an illegal activity. And so, like you rightly mentioned, on the 24th of June last month, there was an event that had Sierra Leoneans, Guinean officials, at a ceremony that led to the reopening of that border. Over a year ago, the border was closed. In normal times, border closure could only happen for specific reasons, whether the country that is closing the border has a major event that it wants to embark on. In collaboration with the neighboring country, it will be closed temporarily. Or when it's no day for work has ended, work for a day has ended, you will close temporarily and reopen in the morning. But there was a situation that led to the abrupt closure of the border on the other end, and they will replicate it same on our end. And that standoff had been there for over a year. But our leadership on both ends of the country, the political and strategic leadership, thought that that was not a good thing. Because the relationship between Sierra Leone and Guinea is one that has been good for several decades. In good and in bad times, we've been at the back of each other to support. When we had the civil conflict in Sierra Leone, Guinea is one of those countries within West Africa that came willingly, voluntarily to support us to pursue the war. And they sacrificed resources, they sacrificed the men who lost their lives in pursuit of that war. That is something that we regard as a very serious consideration in terms of helping to promote the agenda of Sierra Leone. We will never forget that, and we continue to pray for the souls of those men and women who lost their lives during that unfortunate civil conflict. At cross-border level, there are cultural affinities, there are intermarriages. Cross-border trade is top-notch between us and Sierra Leone and any other country in the world. And so consideration for land or border ownership should not supersede those very beautiful things that we have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy. I mean, in any gathering, whether it's within a home, in communities, there are bound to be challenges. But what is important is your resilience, is your ability to resolve those challenges for the progress of human society. So the border has been open.
So, Mr. Wheeler, this reopening, does it only mean that the free movement of goods, services, and people, or those younger residents who were made who were made slaves or displaced in their own town, does it mean that they will go back to their houses? Because that was how the situation was at in Yenga.
So it's a process, and it's a big bag that contains different items. We are unpacking the bag to ensure that everything falls in place. It was unfortunate that the residents of Yenga, the village itself, had to move out of that community for fear of intimidation and the rest. In the press release, we did mention that the diplomatic engagements are continuing and very firmly so to ensure that we resolve that problem once and for all. So it also includes having a situation where you will have all of the residents going back to their community to go to normal life. Without any disrespect, most of the houses in Yenga village were wattle houses. Even where you have concrete structures, if you abandon those for a period, they will go bad. And so in a situation where you had wattle houses and you leave those for a year, you'll only expect that you will need to have some additional measures to have those settlements before you could have people to go back. So it could not be as immediate as you have to reopen the border. But the closure itself brought a lot of untold suffering to people who are residents in that community, or even people who are not ordinary residents in that community. The cross-border activities that happen between Sierra Leone and Guinea are not only beneficial to Sierra Leone or Guinea, they even go beyond Sierra Leone and Guinea. Mali, Liberia, Ivory Coast, Senegal, the Gambia, etc., etc. So it's that kind of a consideration that our leaders have in mind to say, whilst we continue to resolve all of the other issues that could be mid or long term, let us do this one that is immediate, but with conditions that the status quo that used to exist that led to that situation should be revisited.
So what is the situation like? Is it that the Guinea officers are still at the border point? Because in the release you stated that you have NRA personnel there and also Sierra police. So how is the situation like?
Maybe I'll give a very brief description of the topography. The crossing point itself is a little removed from Yenga village. There is the Makona River, the Mua River, where you have crossing from this end onto number one. From this end is actually Kisiten Chiefdom. A little bit away from the river bank on our side, you have Yenga village, you have Sukuma, you have Pogobelu, etc. etc. Pogobelu is a little closer to Kwendu than you have Yenga village. Sukuma is much more strategic because it's on a hill overseeing all of these villages, including the Mua River. So, taxation, NRA activities are supposed to happen on the river bank.
That is
Not,
Yenga.
not actually away, a little away from Yenga.
I'm talking about because
Yeah.
I do understand the topography.
Yes,
like
yes.
this.
So once they collect on their
The
own
level
end,
collection issue
Yes.
should happen at Yenga, around that
around that
bank.
axis.
But
Yes.
currently, where are they at Sokoma? The topography that is very high, which is so
No, I mean,
miles away from.
our deployment is ability deployment that is at Sokoma and Pogobenu. So our NRA officers will be collecting tax on our own side. Wherever they decide to base, it could be at Pogobenu or on the river bank itself. That's
That
a
is
decision for them to
within Yenga. That is
It's
inside Yenga
within,
itself.
it is within the Sierra Leone axis.
That I'm talking is Yenga.
Yes.
Because the Sierra Leone, the Makona River clearly
shares
the land.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
So I'm trying to ask, my question is, the NRA officials, are they going to base along the Sokuma River or along the Makona River or at Sokuma village? Because I don't understand the topography.
That's their decision to make. It is them that will have to determine where it is that they want to have a convenient structure. A structure that would mean that they will not miss out on anything. So if it's right at the river bank, where they think the goods will enter or exit, that is why they want to do the collection, then so be it. It is their decision to make. But the emphasis is taxation on this end has to be collected by NRA officials that are Sierra Leoneans. Taxation on the other end is going to be done by Guineans. That is natural. Before now, the status quo was the Guineans were collecting there and they were collecting here. Very much anomalous.
Okay,
And
so we want to know what is the arrangement like? Is it temporal? Because it is stated in the press release that there was an agreement between Guinea and Sierra Leone that if there is any further border closure, it will be communicated in 48 hours. Is it something temporal?
It's not temporal. The caveat there is understanding the fact that border closure is not a different thing. It is a normal thing. It's not an abnormal thing. That's what I wanted to say. Say if, for example, if Sierra Leone wants to embark on a major event for which we have security concerns around those people or those coming to share border with, we could close. But we are saying that if you want to do that closure, inform the other party 48 hours ahead of your closure. I mean, except where you have extraordinary events. But if it is something that you have planned for, you should be able to have that leverage to say, okay, 3 days ahead of my closure, decision to close the border, then let me inform my colleague. It's like two doors. One coming into your room, and there's another door going into the other person's room. There is a buffer. If I want to close my door to the other person that will be coming from the other room, then it means I have to inform that person, especially so when the protocol is there should be free movement, unfettered movement of goods and services between you and that person.
So, Mr. Will, let's make it clear. Where, because the press release says that our security personnel, they are now on ground. Where are they? Are they at Sukuma or are they at the Makuna River end?
Our security personnel have been on that ground since the 28th of April.
Yeah, they have been at Sukuma. Point they're asking, their current location. Where are they located? Are they currently located in Yenga along the Makuna River, or are they still positioned at that Sukuma end?
They are positioned everywhere because this is security information. Sometimes we are hesitant to deliver that one, but they are still stationed around the Pogebelu, generally the axis, or even Sokoma.
So, Mr. Will, are these the residents of Yenga? Are they presently in their community, or you're still unpacking the bag, as you stated that it's a package that you will be unpacking bit by bit? Are they presently in their communities?
I just mentioned that what obtained in Yenga would mean that you have to put additional measures in place to have them to go back.
So they are not there presently?
If you say let them go, where are they going to? When the Watu houses have dissipated, that's a problem. I stated that there are some situations that you could resolve immediately. There are others that are medium and they are gradual. You do not just resolve them overnight. You cannot construct except if you want to do makeshift structures. But even for those, you need some time to do so. That is part of the discussion that I will continue to hold to ensure that those basic things that they may require, because that's a farming community, it's an agricultural community. So if you want them to go back, you have to take into consideration all of those things.
So, Mr. Will, one of the issues that the people had in Sokom, in that area, where that led to that issue is that they were being driven from their farmlands and their other businesses. Now you've made these arrangements that you now the European will now allow cross-border trade and all of this sort. How sustainable and how assured are these people that when they will be embarking on their trade, they will not be intimidated, assaulted? Because these were all some of the issues. I went there, you know that. So these were all some of the issues that made the people to flee from their town. Exactly. Because when they go there to do their business, they were intimidated by the Guineans, they were beaten, they were driven from their farmland. This new arrangement, are they going to be protected to freely do their business without any problems?
Like yourself and we are equally very much concerned that those things were happening because they are not supposed to happen. And so in reopening the border, we did not just get up overnight and say border open, border close. No. Overnight, there was a decision and there was a closure of the border. To do all things, it's easy to do destruction, but it's not the same when you want to remake. So we had series of engagement. The engagement started from the highest political levels, the presidents of both countries, and that was cascaded onto the professionals, onto those people on the ground. So we had engagements prior to the reopening of the border. We went to Guinea, they came over to us, and we put our cards on the table. It was in agreement between all of us to say X, Y, and Z and things that should happen going forward for the reopening of the border.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Abdul Karim Will, is the Director of Strategic Communications, ONS. They have been taken also Sierra Leone and Guinea from the younger border after diplomatic engagements. We'll move on to another issue as the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, in collaboration with the West African Examination Council, WAEC, has announced that the 2026 Basic Education Certificate Examination (BECE) has been rescheduled. The announcement provides clarity to thousands of candidates, parents, and teachers awaiting the official examination timetable. According to the ministry, the adjustment follows careful consideration of logistical and administrative requirements aimed at ensuring a smooth, fair, and well-coordinated nationwide examinations process. Well, in the studio for the new statistics and other issues surrounding the BECE, we have been joined by the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, Conrad Saki. Good morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to the program.
Okay, so Minister, let's just come from the horse's mouth for our viewers that are watching the program right now. Would you put it into context as to the reason why the BECE was postponed?
Well, first of all, let me acknowledge the fact that we had another date, which was on the 6th of July, but that was based on the information that we had at that particular point in time. Closer to that date, there were other additional information that were provided to us, and on assessing that the information that was laid before me, I deemed it fit that it was best for us to move the date to the 20th. Let me just give a context. Now, for the last 2 years, BECE has commenced something around the third week of July. So this is not new. We were trying to move the date earlier so that the results would come out earlier and that it would not affect the start of the new academic year. We believe, based on my assessment, that even if we were to move it to the 20th, we can still get back to the start of the new academic year without the kids losing their any weeks in the new year. And so that's why we made that decision. But it was very much based on some logistics constraints that we had in terms of the exam of itself.
So, Mr. Minister, when you said logistics constraint, this particular rescheduling that we've seen during the exam, when the exam will commence, are we not going to see a situation where, because even this just concluded was there were serious logistics constraints, some papers, the time were delayed, we had our reporters everywhere, they reported all of the stories. Are we not going to see a situation, a repeat or worse than what occurred during the WAS?
I think any effective leader should learn from mistakes. And the fact that we had some logistical constraints for the WAS results did inform the decision that I made to reschedule the start of this exam. We did not want a repeat of that. I am aware that in terms of WAS, one of the subjects, I think it was English, which is obviously the most popular subject for the exam, had some logistical constraints. The plane that brought in the materials came in very early in the morning, and there were some issues getting them to all the various centers, and so there was a delay in the start of the exams. Even though what you may have seen on social media is the fact that the paper leaked. There was no leakage for the English exams. It's just the fact that there was this logistical constraint. So what we've now tried to do is to make sure that all the materials are in country, and I can confirm that they are in country. I've just received a message from the head of country for WAEC to say that the materials are in country. However, we now need to first of all, clear the materials, pack them securely, and then get them into the various centers. That will be done. I can't obviously go into the details of when they will get to the centers, but we have to make sure that they're properly packed and ready for dispatch.
Okay, so one problem that has been an issue since the introduction of public exams, that is the issue of exam malpractice.
Yes.
It has been on the increase when it comes, even in NPSC, because before now we used to hear only in BECE and WAS. Now even NPSC, there's the introduction of examination malpractice. What has been the role of the ministry in ensuring that you tackle, have you introduced new strategies in ensuring that you tackle examination malpractice? Because it has been destroying our pupils.
Okay, I acknowledge the fact that there are exam malpractices, and let me also just say to you that this is not peculiar to Sierra Leone. In other West African countries like in Nigeria and Ghana, they have the same problem, and it's normally a perennial issue that is discussed at the WIC council meetings on an annual basis. But WIC is getting better at some of this. So let me give you some examples. WIC, for example, has introduced something called serialization. This was copied from the Ghanaians. And what it says is that for each paper, you might have 3 different sets of papers. And so if one of the papers leak, you have 2 others. But also, during the exams, you are not certain which of those 3 papers you will take. So if even that paper, one of the paper leaks, you will then have a situation where other papers can be distributed to different centers. And I think that has made a significant impact in terms of dealing with that particular issue. But having said that, there are other measures that we are taking. Let me share a few of them with you. So we're just about, I've taken a white bill to cabinet, and it has been approved, and we are now taking that bill to Parliament, but it has to go through a process, and that process has commenced. So just go back to this bill. So the last white bill that we had in Sierra Leone was enacted in 1984. This was the year I took O-levels. Now, the convention that deals with how you deal with examination malpractices in WAEC was enacted in 2003, which means that the Sierra Leone Act had not reflected the changes that have been made in the convention. So it was important that we corrected that anomaly. And this bill will do that. It will not only reflect what the convention requires us to do, but it will also be aligned with other applicable laws, like, for example, the Anti-Corruption Act. So if you take, for example, the 1984 Act, if you were to be involved in certain activities, the penalty would be a £10 leones fine. But now, if you take the Anti-Corruption Act, the penalty might be 50,000 and 5 years imprisonment. So we are, to a very large extent, criminalizing some of these activities, and we believe that that would be a deterrent to people actually getting involved in these activities. The other thing that I must share with the public is the fact that in terms of this act, we've looked at it from 3 perspectives. We want to look at activities that malpractices that take place pre the exams. So that will include things like uploading of CAS, that is a continuous assessment grades, where we've had some significant problems. Like, for example, in the case of duplication of candidates, where one candidate might be in 5 different centers. And then we have another set which will look at what will happen to malpractices and how do we deal with malpractices during the exams. That might include someone who takes a mobile phone into the exam hall, someone who colludes, someone who impersonates, and that type of thing. And then there's a third aspect which looks at what happens after the exams. So we've had cases where people will allege that they can go to WAEC and change the grades. So all of those things will now have specific sanctions and stiffer sanctions as compared to what was the place before. And we believe that those will act as a deterrent to the process. But let me also further add that in the case of WAS for 2026, to curb the incidence of high absence rates, which is normally due to duplication of candidates, we have got all the school leaders to sign an undertaking, which actually says that if you have more than 2% absence in your center, then you are going to be held accountable to either repay the money, the difference between the 2% and the actual number that you have in your center, or you will be summarily dismissed.
Okay, so Mr. Minister, whenever we talk about examination malpractice, the ministry, other agencies talk about how they are doing it. Now we are talking about a bill that you take into parliament, that you take into cabinet, which you want to take to parliament, you spoke about the three aspects of the bill, three perspective. One thing I've not heard is enumeration for the markers, because when you look at it, one critical thing that always breeds this problem is that the people that do mark these papers, they are not being well paid. They are not well paid while it's marking the papers. And so, if I'm not well paid marking volumes of papers, then someone just comes from the other end to give me some huge amount of money. People, they'll go and take it. So, what does this particular law that you are pushing for, what does it speak, or does it speak to the welfare of the markers themselves?
Well, I think in a sense I have to be very careful in terms of how I deal with this. We don't employ the markers. The markers might be our teachers, but nevertheless they are employed by WIAC. And so the contractual relationship between those markers and their employers or the person who employs them has to be with them, yes? But nevertheless, we are organizing a series of engagements. So my approach is very much what I would call a carrot and stick approach. And perhaps I need to make it more culturally sensitive. So let me call it a mango and stick approach. So the mango is for us to engage with the general public and ask everybody to be better citizens and making sure that they are aware that education is everybody's business. So yesterday I met with the Minister of Information and Civic Education and his team. And what we are trying to do is to put together a campaign which will deal with that. You may recall that when His Excellency made a statement about the exams and WIAC in particular, he spoke to the Minister of Information. So we are collaborating on that, and I think by the end of this week we should have that campaign, at least a plan for the campaign. Obviously it needs to be funded because we'll have to engage in various levels of media to make sure that it gets to the last mile. But in addition to that, we are also engaging WIAC. So going back to the question of payment of those markers, I think part of that engagement might deal with that.
You think,
Does this include it?
or are you sure? Because this,
No.
you've been a teacher before, and you're an educationist, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, marking these papers, you've marked them before. Marking these papers, it's it's not easy. You understand? And this is the concern among markers, examiners, these teachers, saying that they are not being paid well. In fact, now even you can agree with me now, even WIAC is now constrained to even get more markers because people are shying away from marking these papers because they are not being paid well. And in fact, even when they mark, their money does come on time.
Well, I was very careful in my choice of words. As I'm not the employer, I cannot say to you for certain that their wages will be increased.
But you have the
nevertheless-
power to push the employer to do the right thing.
No, of course. I think in a sense part of that dialogue would be for us to make some recommendations to WIAC as to how we see what we think they can do to address some of these issues. But
You
as
can
I
also
say,
include the invigilators because when they go into these halls, they collect monies from these children so that they can have the level to spy.
okay, so in the case of invigilators, and this is something that we are discussing at the ministry yesterday. Now, a decision was made at the leadership level that the only invigilators that we should make use of, because invigilators are teachers, should be those invigilators that are underpaid. Yes? But we are engaging with the National Council of Conference of Principals to ensure that we can enforce this. Yes?
Okay.
So, but let me also just go back to this. There is a fundamental thing that I think we need as part of that civic engagement. I think this notion that we are associating pay to how people behave, and in particular how people decide to break the law or not break the law, I think it's something as a nation we need to address. So my parents were teachers. They worked at the time in the 80s when they went 3 months, 4 months without pay. But as far as I'm aware, they were not involved in any corrupt practices.
One might argue that the economic situation then,
Well,
with
I
now,
think,
you
No,
cannot
it's
compare.
compared to
but,
now.
no,
It
but I
cannot be
think
compared.
it's relative. I really think it's relative because now you have the opportunity of doing other things as well. But nevertheless, but I'm just saying we have to, as a nation, have that conversation because everything seems to be too transactional, and when things become too transactional, we have the sort of malaise that we currently are faced with.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Conrad Saki, the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education. He has been taken also as the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education as we schedule the 2026 Basic Education Certificate exams, and also is spoken on the plans by the Ministry in curbing examination malpractice. Well, we'll take a health tip of today, and today we'll look at debunking nutrition myth. Eating healthy on a budget to reduce food costs while maintaining nutrition. Grocery shop with a plan. Prioritize buying lean meats and fresh foods and veggies. Look for budget-friendly staples like frozen and canned produce, beans, oats, and rice. Limit sugary drinks and snacks. Let us watch and learn from a health tip of today.
Now, overall food costs have increased. So we are fighting with just generally an inflation in food costs. So this is a good time to really evaluate what you're purchasing week by week. Looking at your grocery list and screening out some of those items you may not need or may not be serving you appropriately nutritionally. So I usually start there, looking at beverages, sugar sweetened beverages specifically that you may not need, snack foods that you may not need, condiments that you may not need, things like that, because most of our nutrition is going to come through our food. Now, any milk or milk alternatives would be a good choice to add to your grocery bill. Any yogurt drinks, anything you might want to utilize to make a smoothie or a protein shake would be a great choice from a beverage standpoint. If you're a coffee drinker, I think that's fine. So top priority looks at lean sources of protein. A combination of different sources of protein are going to give you the most nutrient benefit, but also be the best on your budget, because we know meat can be expensive. So if you offset some of those meat protein sources with plant-based sources, that could be legumes or eggs, beans, tofu, even dairy sources like cottage cheese and Greek yogurt, then we can have a good variety of protein and save some money. And next would be fruits and vegetables. So fresh produce, that's very important. If you're not able to purchase fresh produce just due to the cost, frozen produce is a great alternative. And you can tend to buy them in big bags and they can last a long time and you can save some money that way. With veggies, canned veggies are just fine as long as they're again drained and rinsed. Canned beans are very economical and a great way to get in plant-based protein. I'm a huge fan of bulk shopping. There's many grocery stores that you can do some of that bulk shopping, looking at some of your grains and dry goods to bulk. So oats or brown or wild rice, dried whole grain pasta. The biggest thing with budgeting is planning ahead.
Welcome back. I hope you've learned a lot from that health tips that talks about the meat eating healthy on a budget. When we go over to another very sensitive issue that has to do with drugs issue, and the Inspector General of Police has commissioned a state-of-the-art transnational organized crime unit Toku Forensic Laboratory at Hastings, marking a major step in strengthening scientific investigation into transnational organized crime, particularly illicit drug trafficking. The new facility provides an improved working environment for the police forensic laboratory and boosts the Sierra Police capacity for evidence-based investigations and successful prosecutions. The facility is expected to handle key areas such as ballistic analysis, toxicology, and digital evidences, reducing the long delays that have often affected major cases. Police leadership said the lab will help investigators move from reliance on confessions to evidence-based policing that can stand up in courts. In the studio, we have been joined by CME Police Media 2 ASP Bobson Seno. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Seno.
Yeah, good morning and pleasure for having me this morning.
One might be saying this news, you opening a new forensic laboratory as at this time, it's coming as a shock to many people, saying, why is it now? Or because you guys have been talking about forensic investigations and all of these things. So is it that you are just telling the public, oh, forensic investigation, when initially, when actually you do not have the facility, but you are just talking it?
No, actually we were having this thing before, but the facilities were hosted elsewhere at Connaught Hospital, and we all know the Connaught Hospital is not owned by police. So it's like a dream come true on the side of the Inspector General of Police, and also a huge success for, the entire security sector. Because when we talk about transnational organized crime, it's a combination of all security forces who are also working there. So when the IGP assumed leadership of policing, he decided to say, I really want to develop the capacity of our personnel, because we want effective service delivery. And the only way to achieve this one is to provide the requisite training, skills to those police officers. And also look at infrastructural development to say, we have the manpower, let us develop this manpower and let us look for a conducive place where we can host our own facilities to have absolute domain over it. For instance, we want to go to Connaught Hospital, where previously those items were. From Toko to that place is also a very far distance. From CID also to that place is also a distance to be covered. And you look at as and when we want those things. So he decided to say, let us construct our own, facilities to host all those things. Now we have the manpower. Now we have trained and qualified police officers to do, this forensic analysis. It is, good or timely for us to have these things. So that necessitated the construction of that building at Tuku, Hastings now.
So what difference will this create for your fight against transnational organized crime?
Well, it helps to also strengthen the criminal investigation, because when we're talking about transnational organized crime, we also look at other cross-border related activities. One, we have an analysis on some of those things, arms, to even ascertain if this is arms, this is weapon, the ballistic side, which categories. We also look at fingerprints. We also look at other tangible things that require, forensic analysis. So having these things or put these things in place will now help one to speedily investigate cases, because we are not investigating based on speculations, but we look at things based on the forensic point of view analysis to substantiate the fact that it is. Link this evidence to the suspect is also key in investigation. So it's a very huge success story now on our own side. It's also going to enhance the administration of the justice systems, because the justice system itself is kind of three parties involved. The bulk of the things start with the police, from the detection of crime. We apprehend, we investigate, we charge and prosecute to court. Where the court now look at the merits part of these things, and then if there is conviction, then the correctional now step in. So it's also a huge success on that one.
So SP, despite you do this ballistic analysis, we are concerned about it, but currently the concern is tackling illicit drug trafficking. This your forensic lab. Does it have the capacity to really pinpoint a particular drug to say, okay, we've captured this particular thing during a forensic auditing, we discover that this is cocaine or this is kush? Does this lab has that capacity to determine the exact drug?
Yes, sir. it has that capacity. Of course, we have been using these things the same way at Connaught Hospital. We have been doing this, and during the opening, the IGP talked about over 200 and something cases successfully, convicted at high courts based on this new, trend and new trained, qualified head of the forensics, lab now managing this equipment. So we have categories of drugs, that we also ascertain based on the taste, based on the analysis. We do.
So do you have the technicians with the necessary know-how to pinpoint, put out some of these things as mentioned by the manual? Are they police officers or are they doctors?
No, we have
those
police
that
officers.
are going to be in the lab.
They are police officers. We have police officers. We have doctors. You go now to police training school. We also have doctors. We have lawyers. We have different professions. So we have ASP Stevens. He's the head. He's trained. We have provided the necessary training both locally and internationally. So he is doing that one. He's the only competent one we have to ascertain whether this is drug, classification of drug, cocaine, tramadol, or any other,
So, Mr. Senu, let's talk about the credibility of the individuals that will be manning this place, because putting out some of these things and then maybe someone challenge that in court and then they say, okay, let's go seek for second opinion. Then the second opinion speaks otherwise. So let's talk about the credibility of the individuals that are going to be handling or manning this place.
Yeah, well, in policing we have regulations govern we. Those regulations are strictly, adherence to by every police officer. For instance, we have what we call failing to perform your beats. If I have been assigned to these particular areas to do what's required me as a police officer to do, if I do otherwise, I will be investigated by the CDID, which is Complaint Discipline Internal Investigation Department. So those police officers are trained specifically for that. They are equal to the task. They have been doing it, and they have proved so many cases to court. Recently, there was this drugs arrested at in Bo. There's this checkpoint in Bo, Fala checkpoint in Bo. The guy was asked, "Your resident?" He showed residing at Pandemba Road. So during the course of the investigation, we also established another resident, of which he failed to mention during the course of the investigation.
Okay.
And the police went there at what close, the issues, they discovered a huge quantum of these things. So they took these things to the lab there. They were able to prove and even relate to the man that was arrested at Fala checkpoint. So these are also the complex cases we have proved. These are also issues we have made known to the general public. So we have the caliber of trained and professional police officers who are also ready to execute.
So ASP Robinson, we cannot let you go without you telling us what's the present security situation in Sierra Leone, and what has been the efforts by the Sierra Leone police in tackling drugs, because you can agree with me that drugs has been the order of the day in Sierra Leone. So what has been your movements in tackling drugs?
Yes, security situations across the country is relatively calm and quiet. For drug issues, the way you see the previous one, when you go out there, you see people dancing like zombies, no longer happening.
No, it's still happening.
It's
You see,
still
The magnitude.
the magnitude.
Because
it's as if you are not moving around.
The locations have been changed.
Now you are talking.
Because
Maybe
that's
the location has been changed. But that is also key. And that is why we want the general public to also join the Sierra Leone police. Because we look at the number of police, it's not commensurate to the people we are serving. We are not everywhere at the same time. But if you are seeing, it is incumbent on you to tell us. You understand? But we have made huge success. We have done a lot. And that is why we have even the task force established. We are also helping the police. We have formed us, the Choco is not only totally, entirely run by police. We have other security forces who are also there. We even have people who are not police officers, who are not security personnel, but they are there supporting the fight. So we call on the general public to assist. One, sharing relevant and timely information to the police. We'll respond to some of those things. But we have made huge success in terms of combating drugs across the country.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
do agree?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
It
object.
is, that one is, if I don't want to agree with you because some people might have their own thoughts saying that, so I'm not going to agree with you. Thank you very much. Is ASP Bob Sinsenu, the Salon Police Media 2, who has been talking about the forensic laboratory that they now have at Toku in Hastings. So they are now in a better position to analyze things for themselves without the hassle. Well, we still have with us the Minister of Basic Education. And Mr. Minister, before we let you go, you've spoken about the different things. This, for the sake of emphasis, how well coordinated is your team for the conduct of this Becker examination?
Well, I think one of the reasons why we decided to reschedule the process was for us to do a stock take of what has happened for us and use that to inform our processes for this coming decade. So I think what you would see over the next couple of weeks is that over that period you will have a team from the ministry accompanied by people from the fourth estate and also from civil society organizations, because we want third-party involvement in the process. And there's another element that I'm very keen to bring into the whole mix, and that is to have young people themselves to go out and see what is actually happening in terms of these exams. Of course, there are there are critics who have called themselves experts. I think the more of them will get involved in the process, and including parliamentarians as well, to be part of this process. So we've put together a team, and we are working on the budget at the moment to make sure that we are better placed to do this. But there are some other new considerations that we are taking on board. We are engaging with the Conference of Principals to see whether we can have the invigilators being staff that are on the payroll.
Okay.
But there are other issues that I don't want to mention to the public at this point.
So quickly, let's talk on the issue of failure with regards to English language, because
Yes.
not only for NPSC, Becker and WAS, there's a huge increase in failure of English language. What has been the efforts by the ministry in ensuring that that particular area, because English is a core subject for students to go to pursue other courses in university?
Well, I think that you're right. I think when I announced the results last year, I made a commitment to the general public that the ministry will take a proactive stance on this. So this year we have convened a national dialogue, and there is a plan which has been drawn up to make sure that we put modalities in place to see how we can support our kids to make sure that they are better prepared for the English exams. But in the long term, the government has made foundational learning its priority policy, and that is actually tackling that problem in the first 4 years of primary school, which will have an effect in future years as they move or progress through the educational system. And that is the key to it. But nevertheless, we are mindful of the fact that there are those who have gone through that process and might not benefit from foundational learning, but we are putting in place some form of remediation and training of teachers to make sure that they can teach English alongside the syllabus, but also using the marking scheme of the chief examiner to influence the pedagogy that will be used to teach in English.
Okay, so thank you very much. He is Conrad Sake, the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, who has been taking us to the plans for the Becker examinations and also other plans for the education sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and we'll hope to get you some other time. Well, viewers, we move order to another segment in this Good Morning Salon show, which is the review of the headlines of our local tabloids. I start the ball rolling with the Daily Mail newspaper that says, as he calls for global cooperation against drug trafficking, President Bill strongly rejects narco state narrative. Just in, Sierra Leone experienced a 23% growth in aviation passenger arrivals in Q1. ECOWAS summit calm down. 5 days to go as 15 brand new executive vehicles land in Freetown. These stories plus more you find in the Daily Mail newspaper.
Leading the newspaper banner headline says President Bio's remarkable West African legacy. These stories and more you can find on the Daily newspaper.
Well, the next one I have here is the Vantage newspaper that says SLPP APC are one people. SLPP chairman speaks. $400,000 gold for Admiral Bio husband in court. These stories plus more you find in the Vantage newspaper.
Pyramid newspaper banner headline says Roots launches citizens movement anthem. Government suspends $25 airport security fee and Bio consoles Ghana over flood disaster. These stories and more you find on the Pyramid newspaper.
And the last one I have here is the Standard Times newspaper that says President Bio champions dialogue, constitutionalism and development. Travelers applaud suspension of $25 airport security fee. These stories plus more you find in the Standard Times newspaper.
Africa 24 Communications newspaper banner headline says Lunge demolition opposition leader angry. McKinney mayor explodes. SLPP APC are one people. SLPP chairman. Well, the stories and more you can find on the Africa 24 Communications newspaper. But viewers who must note that these headlines here that does not reflect the views of the SLPC, but we are merely reviewing them. Well, on that note, that's our draw. The curtains of Good Morning Sierra Leone that came to you from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. Many thanks to production crew, especially our producer Daphne Zainab Kamara. Good Morning Sierra Leone returns tomorrow. I am Esther Sako.
But before we go, let's take the quote again. It's from Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi and it says, live as if you are to die tomorrow. Learn as if you are to live forever. I have been Emmanuel Samuel. Good Morning Sierra Leone returns tomorrow, same time. Stay glued to the SLBC. Goodbye.
As a mother of the house, whenever I want to prepare palm soup, there's no need pounding palm fruit. All I need is Nkulenu's Ghana's original palm soup base. My soup is done, and its preparation, it is not difficult at all. Nkulenu palm soup base, it's easily done with no difficulties. Just take few ladles and your soup is done. And its flavor, it's amazing. This is Nkulenu's Ghana's original palm soup base. And this is Nkulenu's Ghana's original spiced palm soup base. Iron fruit and turkey berries are naturally added.
Also available Brown Gold Natural Cocoa Powder, Sunny Gold Brown Sugar, Neat Fufu Flour, Shito, Pisa and Moringa. All available at Nyami Ado Enterprise, 1 Lower Waterloo Street, Freetown.
Nkulenu palm soup base.
Ghanaian original taste.